Welcome to my YouTube channel, No House No Right. The morning, everything started again. The second time you are born, there is no light, no tunnel, no gentle voice calling you home. There is only the sharp smell of vanilla body spray and the sound of someone screaming your name through a bathroom door. A familiar room, a different Chol. Chol sat up a fast, the blood rushed from her head. Her hand pressed flat against the mattress, fingers gripping the warm cotton sheet like they were the only real things left in the world. The ceiling of the room 214 at Calloway Hall started back at her. Same water stain near the window, same flickering bulb above the mirror, same rectangle of narrow rectangle of October light pushing through the certain gap. She was back, not dreaming, not hallucinating from blood loss, back 3 years back, sitting in the junior air room. She had stared with Vivienne Holt, the most majestic and most dangerous person. She had never looked like a sister. The bathroom door swung open with its familiar creak, and there stood Vanina, blonde, hair loose around her shoulders, silk robe slightly open at the collar, one hand pressed to her chest and the other stretched toward Joel, holding a white plastic pregnancy test like it was a winning lottery ticket. Two pink lines, bold, unmistakable, world-ending. Joel, Vanilla voice show, but her eyes were already calculating its precedence, the girl who used to beg her to stop. In her previous life, Joel had leaped from that matter and taken Vinyl by both hands and talked to her straight. Vinyl by both hands and talked for 2 hours straight. She had laid out every person, every risk, and every red flag she had ever noticed about Preston's Ashby and his family. She had carried, she had practically begged, and Vanille had listing. Eventually, brutally, rectangly, she had made the appointment. She had moved on, and slowly, she had never forgotten Joel for it. 3 years of quiet resentment, 3 years of watching Joel succeed in consulting career they had both dreamed about. While Vinyl bounced between jobs and relationships and borrowed rent money. 3 years until the night of Joel promotion dinner when Vinyl had both at the top of the restaurant staircase with too much wine in her blood and 3 years of fury in her chest and sobbed. Joel remembered the marble, she remembered the cold. She was not going to make that mistake again. A smile that cost everything. A smile that cost everything. Oh, wave! Joel let her face open into something warm and full of wonder. Preston, Ashby, you are crying a child for one of the most powerful families in the Boston. Vinyl exhaled. Her whole body seemed to chosen with relief as the smug glow. She had been surprising finally broke free across her face. Right, exactly. I was scared from like 30 seconds, but then I thought, this is it. This is my moment. It's absolutely is, Joel said softly. You are not going to talk me out of it this time. I would never dream of it, Joel said, and this meant every word. Vinyl sat on the edge of her own bed and started listening things. The apartment she imagined, the way Preston would look when he finally understood that she was not just a crucial chapter in his life, but the woman carrying his name forward. She talked for 20 minutes without stopping, each sentence more elaborate than the last, and Joel listened to every word and nodded and smiled and felt the strangest sensation, a grief that had nothing to do with sadness and everything to do with clarity. She was not Vinay's savior. She had tried that one spade with her life. What Lena saw later that afternoon, Joel sat across from Lena Marsh in the narrow campus coffee shop. Both of them curled around chromatic mugs, the rain trapped against the window beside them. Lena studied her for a long moment. You look different, she said finally. I am different, Joe replied. When I told me she showed you the test, she said you were supportive. Lena's voice did not carry judgment, only the quiet watchfulness that had always made her the most trustworthy person in my room. That surprised me. Joe looked down at her coffee. What about the right to make their own choices? Lena was quiet. Then she said, the Ashby family has a legal team with 40 people in it. Joel, I know, Joel said simply. And she did. The Ashby family chooses in. The call that changed the temperature. 3 days after vinyl showed Joel the pregnancy test, the room felt different. Not in any way you could point to exactly. The same cloth is draped over the same chair in the same half-eaten Golona bar on vinyl desk. The same rain streaking down the window glass, but the air had shifted. Vinyl moved through it like a woman who had already coordinated a penthouse in her mind and was simply waiting for the keys. She had called Preston the evening before. Joel had sat at her desk pretending to read her economic textbook while listening to every word through the thin wall of force, claim in vanilla voice. The call lasted 4 minutes. Vinyl came out the bathroom afterward, the bright eyes and a pressed smile. He wants to meet, she announced. Tomorrow dinner. He sounded serious. That is wonderful, Joel said, and turned a page she had not read. She remembered how the dinner had gone in her previous life because Vinyl had called her from the restaurant bathroom, carrying so hard she could barely form sentence. Preston had not come alone. He had sent his mother instead, Mr. Dorotha Ashby. If Preston was a locked door, Mr. Dorotha Ashby was the wall the door was built into. She was 61-year-old, slim as a blade, with silver hair pulled into a knot so precious it looked architectural. She wore no unnecessary jewelry. She did not smile unless the smile was a tool. She had built the legal and public relations infrastructures of Ashby Global Holding for 3 decades while her husband took the credit, and she had never once complained because she understood that power kept quietly is far more dangerous than power displayed. Vinyl had walked into that restaurant in the new dress she had charged to her credit card, expecting Preston. She had found his mother seated alone at the corner table, one hand resting on a slim leather folder, a glass of still water untouched blessed her. Choose was not small. She was sitting in the campus library with her phone face up on the table waiting. The call came at 8:47. The offer on the table. She had a folder, Vinyl said. Her voice had a strange quality to it. Not quite caring, not quite fury. Something suspended between the two like a held breath, an actual folder. Joel, with papers in it. What kind of paper? Joel asked. Already known. A settlement, a number with a lot of zeros, a confidentiality agreement, a clause that says I regulate out of miscuses. I regulate out of Massachusetts vinyl laws, and the sound had broken edge. She slid it across the table like she was offering me a menu. What did you say? I told her no. I told her Preston and I have something real and she has no right to reduce my child to a transaction. Vinyl voice hardened. What? With each word building itself break up like folding, going up around a damaged building. She looked at me like I was furniture that had spoken, and then she said, and I am quoting her exactly. She said, every woman who had never sat across from me at this table has believed what you believe right now. Not now to them was correct. The line went quiet. Chloe closed her eyes briefly. Come back to the room. We will talk. But Joel did not stay. When Vinyl arrived back at room 214, her muscular intact through sheer force of will, Joel had made tea. It was the kind of small domestic gesture that, requiring nothing and offer everything, a Vinyl expect the mug and sat across the legend and her bed and began to rebuild her certainty out of loud. Preston would overrule his mother. Preston had feeling for her, real one. The baby changed everything. One man could turn away from his own blood. Mr. Dorotha Ashby was a fully and bliss back down when who stood firm. Cho listened, she nodded in the light place, she refilled the mugs, and she said nothing about what she now. That is, in her previous life, Vinyl had filled firm from exactly 6 weeks before Ashley legal team filed a fertility challenge designed not to dispute the child but to bury Vinyl in procedural delay until she ran out for money for her own lawyer. The Christian had never once called to ask how she was feeling, that the settlement offer would not come again, and the next document the Ashley family sent would not be an offer at all but a strategy. She said none of it, because she had once before and earned a shove down a marble staircase for the trouble. Oliver at the Liberty steps. The next morning, Joel sat on the stone, sat about the Colby library with the coffee going cold in her hand when Oliver had stopped beside her. He taught a junior seminar on applied ethics that Joel had nearly dropped twice and always been glad she kept. He was 32 thoughtful in the particular way of people who had been genuinely hurt once and chose curiosity over brightness afterward. You like something doing arithmetic about a problem that has no clean answer. He has sitting down unwedded in the easy way of something who read rooms accurately. That is almost exactly what I am doing. Joel said, when to talk about it? Not yet, she said then. After a pause, do you believe people have the right to walk into something terrible if they choose? If it really Oliver thought about it. What the seriousness the question deserved, I think. We protect people from external harm. I think we cannot protect them from themselves without taking something essential away. He paused. Why? Just ethic homework, Joel said. He looked at her sideways and almost smiled. Worst lawyer in the seminar, he said, and stood and walked away. And Joel watched him go and felt, for the first time since walking in the second life, something small and warm stir in her chest that had nothing to do with grief. The second letter. 4 days later, a thick cream envelope arrived at the dorm, dressed to the wine in the clean, impersonal front of a film that did not need to announce itself, because everyone already knew its name. Vinyl held it for a long time without opening it. It's probably nothing, she said. Probably. Jules agreed. Vinyl set it on her desk and went to shower and came back and picked it up again. She turned it over twice. She put it down again and made a phone call to Preston that went to voicemail. She did not open the envelope right that night. But Joel already knew what was inside it, because she had read it once before 3 years ago, standing in his same room, watching the color drain and night face one line at a time. It was not a settlement offer. It was the beginning of the end of every plan Vinana had never ever made. The price of a golden cage. The morning that envelope opened. When I opened it at 6 in the morning, Joel heard the sound of tearing paper from across the room and lay still with her eyes open, staring the ceiling, listening. There was a long silence after the initial rustle. The kind of silence that her weight, the kind of pressed down on the room and changed the air inside of it permanently. The vinyl said very quietly, Joel. Joel sat up. In the thin grey light coming through the curtain, Vinyl looked younger somehow, sitting at her desk in her oversized sleeve shirt. The page spread across her lap, her golden hair loose and unbrushed. She looked exactly like what she was, a 21-year-old girl who had walked confidentially into a game whose role she had never been shown. Read this, Vinyl said, holding out the top page. Joel took it, she read it slowly, giving each line the time it deserved. Though she already knew every word, the Ashby family legal team had filed for formal paternity verification process, not to deny the child, but to establish a court supervised but to establish a court-supervised timeline that would require Vinyl to attend hearing, procedure, produce financial records, submit to a lifestyle evaluation, and respond to correspondence with 48 hours. Windows or risk default judgment. It was not aggressive in tone. It was worse than aggressive. It was patient. It was a document written by people who understood that time and paperwork are more effective weapons than threats. They are going to make this so complicated that it cannot afford to fight it. When I said, her voice was flat. The bravado had no crack. It had simply evaporated the way morning forts disappear without drama. That is their intention, Stoll said carefully. You know, when I looked at her, not with anger, not yet, but with the draw of focus, something recapitulating everything that thought that understood. You know, something like this would happen. I suspected the Ashby family would not make things simple. Joel said, what was true, which was also far less than the whole truth. When I looked at back the page, Preston still has not called me back. What the lawyer said, Lena came with Joel to the free student legal advice clinic that Thursday afternoon, sitting in the plastic chair outside the consultations room while Vinyl went in alone. Joel had suggested the clinic quietly, practically, the way she had learned to suggest things in his second life, not as warning, not as interventions, just a suspensible next step that Vinyl could choose to take or not. Vinyl had taken this one, which means some part of her, underneath the pride and the shaken certainty, was beginning to understand the shape of what she was facing. They waited 40 minutes. When Vinyl came out. They waited 40 minutes. When Vinyl came out, her face was composed in that specific way of people who are refusing to feel something in a public place and saving it carefully for later. He said the process they had started in completely legal, she told them, sitting down and folding her head in her lap. He said they can drag the verification timeline out for a month. He said I would need a private family attorney to push back effectively and that would cost money I do not have. She paused. He also said the settlement they offered me initially was, in his words, genuinely reasonable for an out-of-court resolution. Lena said nothing. She reached over and put her hand on top of Vinyl folded ones. Joel said nothing either. She looked at the water-stained ceiling of a clinic hallway and thought about the version of herself who had sat in the same hallway 3 years ago, gripping Vinyl hand and crying alongside her and feeling every blow land on her own chest. The Joel had walloped Vinyl so completely that she had made Vinyl pain her own personal emergency. This Joel still felt something. She was not made of stone, but the feeling had changed its shape. It was more likely watching something you once know every wheel standing at a crossroad you had already traveled and understand that the only honest thing you can offer them in the space of choose. Preston's call. He called that evening. Joel was in the library when Wine texted her. He finally called, going to talk in the courtyard, don't not wait up. She did not wait up. She read her textbook and then walked back to the room slowly through the cold night air. Her breath walking small white clouds, her mind unusually quiet. Oliver was coming down the opposite path with the coffee in each hand and stopped when he saw her. Late study season, he said. Always, she said. He held out one of the coffee. I bowed. Two by accidental, concealingly accidental. She took it. They walked the last stretch of path together without needing to fill the silence which Joel had always believed was the trust test of whether a person company was actually good. With Oliver, it was genuinely good. It had been good in her previous life too. Only she had been too tangled in Vinyl crisis to notice him properly until it was too late noticing to matter. This time she noticed, can I ask you something? She said as they reached the fork where their buildings split. Always, he said, if you ask something, make a choice, they would hurt them, and you had tried to stop them before and it cost you everything. Would you try again or would you let them go? Oliver was quiet for a moment. The campus light out the side of his face. I think, she said slowly, that that the most loving things is not always the same as the most painful things. Sometimes the most loving things is to trust someone enough to let them learn. He paused, and sometimes it's take very good care of yourself while they do. Joel looked at him for a moment. That it's a good answer. I have been working on it for a while, he said simply, and said good night and walked away. The contract Vivienne signed. Wine came back to the room at 11th with red eyes and steady hands. She sat on her bed and told Joel what Preston had said, that he cared about her, that her family was complicated, that he went to do right by the child, that there was a new arrangement his lawyer had drawn up that would give her financial security and privacy and a guaranteed role in her child life, structured and protected and permanent. If sounded the way Vivienne described it, almost that everything she had wanted. And you are going to sign it? Joel asked. I already did, Vivienne said. He had it with him. Joel observed that. Did you read all of it? About most of it. Joel looked at her roommate's face. The exhaustion, the relief, the small, stubborn ember of hope still burning behind her eyes, and make a decision. I am glad you have something in writing, she said. Make sure you keep a copy somewhere safe. Vinyl nodded. Then she lay down and pulled her blanket up, and within 10 minutes her breathing had gone slow and even. Joel sat in the dark for a long time. She knew what was in that contract because she had read it 3 years ago, the day Vivienne finally showed it to her in tears after the first clause activity. The financial support was real but modest. The role in her child life was structured so narrowly. It was almost theoretical and buried on page 11 in the clean impersonal language of people who had this professional was a clause that meant Vinyl could not speak publicly about Preston, Ashby, of his family for the rest of her life, could not reside with 40 miles of any Ashby primary residence, and would forfeit and provisions if she violated and term at any time for any reason. It was not a settlement, it was disappearance agreement with a monthly payment attached. And Vinyl had signed it in a cold courtyard because a man she loved had been warm to her for 40 minutes, handed her a pen. What's your bill inside? The semester turned. November came. December. Vinyl moved through the weeks in a quieter register. The grand dreams not gone but compressed into something more cushioned, more private. Did not like about the penthouse apartment any more. She talked about the baby due date. She called her mother for the first time in 8 months. Joel studied. She met with her academic advisor and restructured her course loading. She applied for the summer internship at a consulting firm she had joined in her previous life 3 years later than she could save. She went to Oliver Simmer every Tuesday and Thursday, and sometimes they walked the coffee shop afterward and talked about applied ethics and reliable memory and what it means to owe someone honesty, what it means to owe yourself survival. She was building something quietly, carefully, with both hands. In that time, she had covered with choosing not to blame for someone who would not remember it. On the last day of the semester, Lena sat across from her in their usual coffee shop, both and said, You seem different this year, settled. I feel different. Joel said, Good, different. I think so. Joel said. She looked at the rain-streaked window at the grey Boston afternoon and felt, what a clarity! That was almost physical. That was exactly where she was supposed to be, not because the world had become easier, but because she had finally stopped carrying weight. That was never hers to live. Vinyl would have her child. The Ashby family would remain exactly what they and Joel Winter, reborn and clear-eyed, would build a life so solid nothing, and no one could her push from her to the top of the street again. Thank you so much.